Hello everyone. My name is Jorge Rubio. I am having this conversation from Canada. I've been living in Canada for the last 2 years, and my objective to come to Canada is first to understand the cannabis industry in the Canadian market space. That's why I have the decision to come to Canada and to set up a company here with the objective to start some introduction and some advisory for Canadian or American companies interested to go into Mexican market. Uh, I'm also an advisor of the external committee of senators and policymakers in Mexico, but they are now working in the cannabis regulation in Mexico. So this conversation will be in 7 points. I will talk about a little bit about my background. Then I will talk about the Mexican health system that is really complex. The third point, I will talk about a little about some Mexican economic and social facts. I will talk about also about the 2016 regulation in Mexico that approved medical cannabis in the Mexican market. I'm going to talk about also the fifth point is talk about what is happening from since 2019 to this day and what is happening with all the regulation and all the bills in the Congress now. The sixth point, I'm going to talk about how I see the potential of how the CBD market, well, not only the CBD market, the cannabis, the hemp, the reef products, the THC and CBD products, how is the market integrated? And at the end of my conversation, I will talk about the holistic way that I see that international companies can go into the market, not only with products, also with technology, education, transfer of technology, and also for growing. So a little bit of my background, I have experience and expertise in pharma industry. I work for huge pharma companies for the last years, also medical devices, and I work for some years in the federal Mexican government in the health institute. So I have some studies in a master in business, politics, and I came here to Canada to study a specific business program, and I focus these studies into the cannabis industry space. So this is about my market, and my background. So the next step is talk about the health system. The Mexican health system is a kind of complex because we have two health systems trying to working together. So for in the first, on one hand, we have a public health system that covers at least 80%, 80 to 85% of the population, which means about 80 to 90 million people across Mexico City. This health system is complex because it is provided by five public institutions. One, the Ministry of Health. The second, the Mexican oil company health system. Third, the health system of each state. And five, the IMSS, that is the public health system and social security for workers, for formal workers. So in this space, we work also with a private health system with private physicians, private pharmacies, and private hospitals, and the expense out of the pocket of the people. Normally, these people have insurance companies. They can have their own insurance policy to go to a private health system. So it is a kind of complex, it is the fragmented health system, and in Mexico there is no reimbursement of certain drugs and procedures. So this is very interested if you're talking about in the future of CBD and THC healthcare products and pharma grade products. This is a kind of complex and interesting to talk about. So some of the Mexican facts: we are the 15th economy of the world. Our GDP per capita is $10,000 a year. The inflation rate is 2.3 by this year, 2.3%. And Mexico has a population of 135 million across the Mexican city, across the Mexican Republic. Most of them living in center of the country and the south of the country, which means those states close to the Pacific coast, to the Gulf of Mexico, and central Mexico. It is a very important hub of development of technology and with big industries. The economy is divided by 60% services, 30% industry, and about 5 to 6% agricultural business. The president now is from the left party, and he will govern Mexico till 2024. The median age of Mexicans is about 32, 33 years old, so it is totally a new generation, and it is a young country at all, and different with other countries in the world. So, what happened in the last years with cannabis regulation? During 2016, 2017, the last administration of President Peña approved medical cannabis for certain health problems. So on these dates, Mexico has two chambers, Senate and deputies. So what happened in this time is that both chambers approved the legalization of medical cannabis, and they sent the approval to the Ministry of Health with the mandate of the Ministry of Health to create a bylaw and specific regulations for the medical cannabis, including CBD. So what happened then is that the Ministry of Health delayed almost 2 or 3 years to set up specific guidelines how to produce, how to import, how to prescribe, and other things about CBD products for health. So in the last month of that administration, the regulatory agency called COFEPRIS create a guideline how to import CBD products from international companies. But the problem is that this guideline does not comply with the Ministry of Economy. So the COFEPRIS gives to some companies, to some private companies, a license to import CBD products from other parts of the world. But in the same time, the Ministry of Economy sent a note to this regulatory agency, tell them that this regulatory framework does not comply with the HES codes, so the HES codes remain prohibited in terms of CBD or hemp or any cannabis derivative products. So when the new government arrived and took seat, the new government understand that the complexity of this guideline, and they revoke the guideline, and they revoked some of the license granted in this year. So what happened now is that some companies use a legal resource called Amparo, and they have a revoked license, they have this legal resource, and they can start some import of the products, some CBD import to Mexico. So it is a real problem because most of that companies does not understand the industry. They are not retail stores. They don't have experience in distribution, and in certain way they can't supply the real Mexican market because, as I told you now, everything is in a gray space of law, and you cannot import easy these products into Mexican market. So all the products that we'll see now in Mexico are technically illegal, and there is no retail store, an important retail store that have CBD products in their shelves because they don't like to have problems with the regulatory agency. So this is an important aspect because when I travel to U.S. and Canada and I meet some people interested to come into to go into Mexican market, it is very important to explain them that the supply chain is not totally legal, that they will face some custom problems in terms of importing goods to Mexico, and they need to work with specific license companies to do business with. So uh, the lack of knowledge of authorities, the lack of knowledge of these companies that have the amparo, this legal resource, and the lack of knowledge of the customers and patients in Mexico, it's making a real mess in terms of knowledge of the potential of CBD products or cannabis derivatives, also by hemp. So now I am talking about uh, what is happening from 2019 to this day. So as I told you, since 2000 and 2017, and during 2019, the Mexican Senate uh, present 11 initiatives trying to regulate this complex industry. On October 2019, the working group of senators that I am external advisor of them presented one law draft with the objective to regulate the following markets in Mexico: recreational, medicinal, and industrial. On January 9th of this year, 2020, the Senate presented some modifications of the previous bill of October 2019. So this bill presented in January, it is the most important agreement of several political parties, and also with the opinion of different ministries of agriculture, of health, the Ministry of Interior, that they are working on this issue. And this is the one only bill that will be a law at the end of the year if the things goes better with that. So on March 2020, just few weeks before the COVID crisis, the Senate approved this bill in commissions, which means that the second step is to vote the bill in the full chamber of Senate, and then to send the bill to the chamber. It is important to say that Mexico has two chambers, Senate and deputies. So the bill starts in the chamber of Senate. The commissions of Senate approve the bill. Three commissions: Health, Justice, and Legislative Procedures approve the bill. And the next step is to send the bill to the full House for voting process. If the bill pass this the voting process, they will send the bill to the Chamber of Deputies for the same purpose: technical opinions, readings, and approve in commissions. And if they approve in commissions, if the Chamber of Deputies, they need to pass and vote the bill in the full House of the 500 deputies of Mexico. If they pass the two chambers, the next step is to sign the bill by the Mexican president, and to become a real general law. I am talking because it is very important, because I heard and I read many people around the world talking about Mexico regulation or Mexico legalization. The first thing important is that it's not a legalization. It won't be a full legalization. It will be a regulation of the industry in these three markets that I going with. So, uh, uh, but the most important thing is not to have the general law. The general law is the framework. The second, and in my opinion, the most important process is how can be the implementation of the law of all the federal government and including all the municipalities and including the 32 states of Mexico. That is really a challenge how to implement in their real complex regulation Mexican framework, how to regulate and how to implement all these aspects. So what is in the bill? Give me 1 second. So the purpose of the law include 4 important markets. First, the creation of a recreational industry. In the recreational industry, you may probably have the possibility to have and to grow 4 plants in your home, to develop what they call cannabis associations for self-consumption only. That includes 2 members to 20 members, and no for commercial purpose. It's only for your own consumption and for your organization. The third aspect of the recreational license will be the possibility to have retail stores in Mexico, across Mexico, only three licenses per company, per person. And if you have a license, you can have a retail store in the state where you have a license. So you cannot have one license. If you win a license, you cannot have one in Mexico, one in Cancun, and one in a northern city. You will have the license where the place you live. The fourth important thing in terms of recreational is strict regulations in terms of packaging, labeling, marketing, promotion, and communication. The second license will be in research. The purpose of that is that this license will be granted only for academic institutions. They need to submit a medical protocol and clinical trials. So it is important because it is a development of these studies and clinical trials needed around the world. Mexico can have their own clinical trials with Mexican population, and they will start also something and some specific policy in terms of guidelines of research. This is the second. The third one is for medical purposes. Medical purposes in specific medical and pharmaceutical use of products, and import and export medical pharma grade products from other parts of the world. The fourth license, the purpose of the fourth license will be an industrial, where you can grow marijuana only in 2.4 acres, and the possibility to grow hemp is not yet defined. The land, the amount of the land that you needed to grow hemp, it will be a permit, not a license. So in this aspect, the Ministry of Agriculture will set up guidelines of how will be the amount of land you need to grow hemp, in which states and in which municipalities, which seeds, and the maximum production that a company will have. So as briefly talking, you have the possibility to have a license of growing, a transformation, retail, and import and export. Mexico, in this bill, Mexico does not allow a vertical integration of the company. So one company will have a growing license, other company will have a retail, and it won't be allowed to one company have 4 licenses for a vertical integration. So what happened, as I told you, what happened in this year, the Senate presented the law in January. They vote the law in commission in March, and the next step is to vote into the full chamber to approve the law and to send it to the Chamber of Deputies. But because of the COVID crisis, the Supreme Court gave a deadline. The first deadline was 30th of April of 2020. But because of this health crisis, the Supreme Court gave them gave the Senate a deadline of December 15 to set up a full regulation of cannabis in the medical and industrial and recreational aspects. So what I see is that the next legislative period in Mexico will start the 1st of September. So what I see is that the policymakers will start again the conversation and the procedures the, to focus to set up a regulation before the deadline granted by the Mexican Supreme Court. So what I see now is that there are people very interested in terms of medical cannabis to understand more about the benefits of CBD, to start research about THC and CBD. Customers in Mexico are really curious about what CBD does, and but not all the population are really interested, and they are a kind of there is a kind of fear about the stigmatization, as you will know, about recreational cannabis industry, and that's why in Mexico, as you know, and you heard a lot of stories of these of the cartels and drug lords. There is an stigmatization because cannabis is always related to violence, to crime, to drugs, specific in Mexico for the last 50, 60 years. So I don't feel that the Mexican population is totally agree with the recreational aspect, but I think a huge possibility in terms of medical and in terms of industrial. And I see that talking about industrial, and I mean growing hemp and growing marijuana, Mexico could be a real important player around the world. So some highlights of, now I like to talk about briefly about some highlights of the bill I am talking about. So as I tell you, they need to regulate the recreational, the scientific, the medical, and the medical, therapeutic, and the industrial aspects. It is important that the bill includes the creation of the Mexican Institute of Cannabis, the MIC. Some of the groups, it will be a vulnerable groups. The vulnerable groups will be a priority of the 40% of the license, where cannabis has been a violent struggle in the last 10 years. So it is also a social component of the bill. The Mexican Institute of Cannabis, the MAC, will be created after the regulation pass, and they will have the mandate to set up all the specific and operational aspects, which means the process of granting license, the CBD and THC limits, medical guidelines, operational aspects of the institute, seeds authorization, and all the aspects, all these important aspects of how to implement our rules. It will not be vertical integration, but it is expected to allow 49% of international investment with local players. As I told you, hemp will need a permit, not a license, and the bill includes the prohibition by now for edibles and beverages or CBD or THC derived. So in terms of recreational aspects, it will be a decriminalization of cannabis, and the possession of 28 grams will be allowed till 28 grams to 200 grams with the specific permits. If you have in your own possession more than 200 grams, it will be considered a crime, and you go to jail and you will have a fine. In terms of promotion, advertisement, it will be very strict, I'm not agree with this kind of tough laws in terms of marketing and communication advertisement, because I think that affect in some way the industry and the education of customers. It will be also allowed to have your own seeds, plant tools, and you need to register in. I am talking about recreational way. You need to register your plants, your seeds, and the plants you have in your home in the MIC institution. So uh, selling cannabis products by phone, online, email, or all the other distribution channel with no verification process will be considered a crime. And the important thing is that it is this is an interesting step. So how Mexico is becoming an important leader in the cannabis space, but what I see is a lack of education of many aspects of the industry. So I think for companies like yours or people interested to do business distribution, selling, partnerships, it will be, in my point of view, you need to see an holistic way to how to do business there. So first, my opinion is that you need to be focused into customer and patient education. Physicians education will be very important. It is important for companies to understand deeply the regulatory and law and legal framework in Mexico that is really complex, and I mean HS codes, intellectual property, GMPs, and distribution. If you understand the customer necessities, the physician education, the channels of distribution, and the legal framework, I think you will be very successful at that. What me and my group we're doing now is to advising in some way to companies how to navigate this complex legal framework to doing business in Mexico. And I think uh, some companies are really interested to understand the market, to go with local players, and to understand how is the Mexican behavior and customer necessities, because we also we don't Mexico does not have any data of CBD, THC, or hemp food consumption. So it is a kind of goal like in a market like no see the specific path to go into the market. So it is important to say that the private market, it is integrated by supermarkets, chains, and I mean pharmacy chains and wellness chains, other independents, department stores, price clubs, e-commerce, independent retail, wellness stores, dispensing, and door-to-door business. So, in my point of view, uh, companies abroad Mexico need to understand and to create a business model specific to Mexico and go to this market target to be successful. Mexico is huge, and the market is huge. It is a big country, so if you don't go into specific market target, you probably have a possibility to fail by far your business strategy. So business development is very important. It's a mix of business development, marketing, legal framework, and to understand how is the consumption and the point and the behavior of the potential customers in Mexico. Uh, but for the next weeks, we are waiting the next steps of the Chamber of Senate to see if they vote if the full House vote the bill, and then to pass to the Chamber of Deputies and to see the procedures there. I see that Mexico have a strong necessity now to create, specifically talking about growing hemp and marijuana. And the important thing for policymakers is to have a division of what is hemp industry and all the possibilities of hemp, and in the other hand, to talk about marijuana, the risk, the opportunities that have this business. The problem that I see is that some of them think in the two business in the same way, and I think the best option is to have one policy for hemp and one policy for marijuana to start this possibility. My personal opinion is that Mexico needs to go first with medical cannabis, medical CBD, I mean, wellness, cosmetics, uh, to educate patients, to educate customers, and educate physicians. One step. Second step is to create an agricultural policy to grow hemp, wait for a while for marijuana, and then start with marijuana growing, see how is the market, I mean locally and internationally, and at the third and the final step, to see if Mexico is prepared for a recreational marijuana market with retail stores, because if they integrate all the industry and they do it in a full legalization, in a fast track full legalization, the complexity of the implementation will be worst. Thank you very much and take care.